Welcome everyone to the GrasRoots Case Competition Q&A. We're going to be having the case competition later next week. August 20th is the kickoff event. And I want to just first by talking about what we're going to be going through today, talk a little bit about what this case competition is, what our partners and our sponsors look like. I want to talk a little bit about the NOVA team here, who we have as our speakers today, and then also go through some of the commonly asked questions and see what our panelists' responses are. So first of all, to jump into the case competition. Right now, our organization, GrasPods, we are the BC Cancer Graduate Student and Postdoctoral Fellow Society. So right now, GrasPods has been around since 2005, and our main goal has been to provide graduate students and postdoctorate fellows a network, both in terms of scientific exposure and then also a network with other graduate students from more of a social perspective. And we're collaborating with the Gynecological Cancer Initiative out of BC to provide this case where individuals be solving a real-world gynecologic cancer problem that is directly going to be related to a problem within British Columbia. And they'll also get a chance for their solution to be implemented into British Columbia's healthcare policy. So teams are presented with the case. They have only 2 days to solve it. And then we're going to have a judging panel that will go through each team's solutions. And those are some of the dates here. We've got registration deadline on August 19th. The kickoff will be the 20th. And then after that weekend, we'll have the presentation and judging. And our sponsors are NEB and Diamet. So now to introduce our panelists. So this is the NOVA team out of Ontario. From my understanding, the NOVA team originally started with Sonia and Abhishek, who were involved in a few case competitions, and through kind of a collective involvement in some consulting related case events, the rest of the team found each other and came together to go and compete at the 7th annual McGill Graduate Management Consulting Association case competition. And collectively, you guys came in first place. And I thought this would be a great opportunity for you to share with a lot of the individuals in Vancouver what a case competition is, how graduate students can kind of have a unique angle towards these case competitions, and also why to even do a case competition, regardless of each individual's kind of personal career goal or aspirations. So I guess if you could each kind of take a turn to introduce yourselves, that'd be incredible. If Sonia, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I'm Sonia. I'm a fifth year PhD student. I don't know, I lost track at the University of Toronto. And my PhD is in neuroscience. I study brains and how when kids injure their brains in sports and in other life events that can affect development, and specifically look at MRIs. And I became interested in case competitions and in consulting when a consulting firm came to my institution to explain to us what being a consultant was about. And it sounded like a lot of the things that I really enjoyed about science in terms of solving problems and always learning. But yeah, just a different path.
Awesome. Nathan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, my name is Nathan, and unlike the other 3 of our members, there's 5 of us on our team, but unfortunately, Magda, our 5th member, couldn't make it today. But I am one of the 2 master's students on the team, Magda being the other one. So I'm not quite as, brilliant as my fellow teammates here. They're so smart. Anyways, so I'm also in Toronto, and I study neuroimaging, specifically looking at Alzheimer's disease and certain symptoms like apathy. I do a lot of neuroimaging and looking at MRIs and comparing between them, doing a lot of like high performance computing, cutting up brains and stuff. But how I ended up in consulting, or rather my interest in getting into this field, comes a little bit more from kind of like what Sonia said, this idea of integrating different problems, trying to tackle on a real world challenge. I'm a little bit tired of, frankly, the research academia world is a little bit slower, and consulting seems to be a little bit quicker. So that's kind of my interest there. And I guess yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll leave it off to our next person on our panel.
Sweet, I guess that's me then. So my name's Abhishek. I'm the only one here that's not from University of Toronto. I'm from McMaster University. My PhD is in chemical engineering, and specifically I'm working on a project related to water and wastewater treatment. But my interest in consulting and my interest in specifically case competition, extends all the way back to undergrad. I've participated in a ton of case competitions during my undergrad, specifically more so related to engineering. But when I transitioned into graduate school, one of the first things I remember Googling was case competitions for graduate students because I love them so much. Luckily, organizations like the GMCA host consulting-based case competitions for graduate students. And since October of 2020, so less than a year ago, I've participated in 3 case competitions, all with Sonia. And the reason there is a lot of interest for case competitions amongst graduate students is because a lot of management consulting firms are actively hiring PhD students and actively hiring people who've gone through a formal training, quote unquote, in research. So very happy to talk to you about my experiences there today.
All right, so I'll wrap it up. I'm Simon, and I'm a 5th-year PhD student. My research focuses on looking for drugs against virulence factors, whether that be viral, bacterial. So pre-COVID, I focused on anthrax toxin, diphtheria toxin, C. diff toxin, and during COVID, I guess I can't say post-COVID, I'm focusing on COVID itself, like the actual virus. So that kind of keeps me busy, keeps me interested. But I came into case competitions and consulting more of like happenstance. A year and a half ago, I wanted a new challenge, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, UCG, which is a university consulting group, is looking for consultants. Maybe apply there, try it out." And I did, and I loved it. And kind of from there, I loved the whole pace and environment of consulting, and I just kept on going. And I tried so many different things. I did a few case competitions, and here I am.
Incredible. I think it goes to show how kind of diverse and skill set this team is, and I think that probably contributes to a lot of the success your team's found as well. So it's important. I think we're really trying to reflect that an interdisciplinary team brings a lot to the table, and really great to get a chance to hear a little bit of your research and your aspirations. And let's jump into the Q&A. So we've reached out to some of the different members, team members that are going to be working on the case competition next week. And there's just some of the kind of major questions that have come up. And we just wanted to first go through some of these and kind of get an idea of how, if you have kind of a collective response, a general idea, but also we're really looking forward to kind of individual takes on each of these kind of questions. So in this type of Q&A, we can start with Sonia, but anyone who feels like they want to kind of take it their direction, Adam, please go ahead. So first question is, and this can reflect your past case competitions, like the most recent one, or even further back. But start off with what strategy was used to approach the main problem?
Yeah, so I can start off. So it's funny, when I looked at these questions right before we started, I actually approached answering these questions in the way I think that we approach a case competition, which is by understanding what kind of question you're answering and kind of coming up with a stepwise approach to do that. And so what I did is I kind of looked back on our notes and our files that we generated in our previous case competitions to really understand how we went through the process of solving the problem. And the very first thing that we did is really simple. It's just reading the case and really understanding what you think the main problem that's in the document that you've been given in your case competition is. And then kind of the next thing that we did is that we met with the team and we all had a discussion about what each individual's opinions were on the case. And kind of this first impression is important, but it's also very important to take a deeper dive and to try and reach outside of your first instinct, your first thought. And so the way that we've done that in the NOVA team and the way that me and Abhishek have done that in previous case competitions is by applying frameworks. This is something that honestly, I feel like Abhishek should break down because he's our framework god. But a framework is basically just a instruction manual for breaking down a problem and for kind of labeling different aspects of it to really be able to lay it all out and see it in front of you without any implicit biases. And so these are the two things that we did to approach the problem. What did we think the problem was? What did our team think the problem was? And breaking down the problem into categories using tools and then reevaluating it from that outside perspective.
I can add a little about the framework aspect of it. So one of the biggest things that really changed from the first case competition to the last case competition we did was our approach to using frameworks. One of the main things we learned as going through all these case competitions is that frameworks aren't really gospel, and they're just there to guide you, and they're not really there to provide you with an answer. It's just a way of organizing what your findings are. And often when you start doing a research and you start getting all these market reports and all these scientific reports and you start organizing these your findings into frameworks, you start realizing that certain patterns or certain trends start to appear. And that really is what guides your solution or your strategy that you want to implement. So my advice with frameworks are, you can Google consulting frameworks. There are a ton out there, such as like the SWOT analysis, the 4 to 5 forces, etc. But you definitely want to be cautious with the ones that you do use. They are really helpful, but you always need to keep in mind that doing the framework isn't really the end of the line. You need to actually extract information and try to understand what the framework is trying to tell you. And if you start doing a framework and you start realizing that this is not really going to show us anything that we don't already know, there's no point in really continuing with it because you only have 2 days to do the case competition. So definitely pick and choose and be wary about the kind of information that you will be getting from doing the framework.
Yeah, I guess also to add on to what Abhishek was just saying here, frameworks were very, very, very helpful for a team in terms of being able to frame our thinking around the problem. But what I will also add is that understanding the type of problem that you have in front of you. So for example, your case might be a case on marketing. Maybe it's trying to, sell a product to a certain demographic, or your case could be something like market entry. So introducing a product to a new area. Or it might not be dealing with products at all. You might be dealing with a merger or acquisition, or dealing with some type of supply chain issue, or any category of business problem, because that's kind of the world of consulting. You're kind of thrown any problem that is under the sun, and then you're told, find us a solution. So I think, especially when you're choosing your framework too, it's important to keep in mind, like, does this framework work for the case or work for the case that's in front of us? If it doesn't work, then move on to a different one. But if it does work, then I think it's definitely very helpful to just sit down, kind of come up with what you think is relevant, and not necessarily will all the facets of a framework be relevant, but it's certainly helpful in that kind of mutually exclusive, comprehensive, and exhaustive manner to kind of encapsulate an issue when you have it in front of you and you're looking at it for the first time.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up and kind of give you my personal take on kind of how I would approach a main problem, I think of it in 2 ways. One is put it in your own words. So what Sonia was saying, clarify the problem. That's very, very important. And then the second part is like run through the woods, which means try to understand where the problem is coming from. Like if you're not, let's say it's a company that has a profitability problem, try to understand what's happening in that industry, right? That kind of can help you clarify the problem and give you an idea of what they're really talking about. Because sometimes a lot of jargon is used, and if you're not familiar with the field, the jargon really won't make sense. So yeah, put it in your own words and run through the woods.
Incredible. Let's move on to the next question. I think that's pretty comprehensive. So we've got our framework and we're working through we've got the problem defined. We're trying to approach it in a concise manner. We've chosen our framework. Now, what other resources could we use once we know how to approach that framework? And this is going to be very specific to different cases. Right now, the case is going to be based on kind of collaborating with the gynecological cancer initiative. So within that context, I want our kind of attendees and viewers to kind of think about that. But in terms of your own experiences, how did you arrive from the point of getting the problem, developing a framework, and then reaching that solution? What did that path look like for you?
Okay, I can get started here.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things that really stood out for us during this last case competition that we won was the fact that we had all our recommendations and our strategies backed in data. And that's something that a lot of judges look for, is if you make a claim, are you able to stake your reputation on it? Do you have the data to back up your answer? So once you, maybe even before coming to a solution, you definitely want to have all that data and all those resources built up, such that if a judge asks you a question and you need to prove to them that your solution is backed in some sort of concrete evidence, that you're able to pull that up. So in terms of resources, one thing that we found really, really helpful, and coming from a science background, I wish I knew this a lot earlier, was that usually almost every university in Canada has access to certain databases if you're a student. And if you Google, UBC library databases, usually your library website will have a list of databases that you have access to. And there are amazing market reports, amazing literature out there available, and these resources that are able to allow you to back your strategies and data. So definitely look for having some sort of database of resources that you can pull information from. In terms of how we arrived at our solution, it's really synthesizing the data and finding gaps in the market, and trying to piece together what's already available and developing a strategy around that, and coming to a data-backed solution that way.
Yeah, I guess kind of to try and rewind a little bit. So absolutely having data to back up your claims is really, really important. And I think that throughout all the case competitions that me and Abhishek have done together, making sure that our solutions were realistic was what set us apart. They weren't always most flashy, exciting solution, but if it works, it works. And that's what is important. And that's what the person that you're trying to help, or the company that you're trying to help, cares about at the end of the day. So kind of how we actually arrived at what are the ideas that we're presenting, started off by understanding the field that we're looking at. So maybe some of you are working in gynecology and you really understand the field, but you may not understand the field of the company and the type of medicine that they're developing, the type of patient that they're trying to reach. So the first thing that we did is we kind of delegated for each person to select a subject to do some basic research on. And so, for example, one of the cases that we worked on was about the cruise industry. And so we separated that into the legal and political section, the health and safety of the passengers, what are the logistics of cruising, and what is the client profile. And these are pretty general categories that can probably be applied to the same case competition to kind of build a basic understanding of what the market looks like and what the industry looks like. And then the next thing that we did was we each brainstormed ideas, as simple as it sounds, just what are some realistic ideas? What are some maybe crazy ideas? Because at the end of the day, the solution that you move forward with is usually going to be a fusion of all of those things. And after we came up with our ideas, what we did is we wanted to rank them quantitatively. So we were able to use the basic research that we did to be able to come up with different categories that we knew were really important in our industry, to be able to select the best ideas based off of research. So again, making sure that the solution that you're moving forward with is something that is going to work and that's going to be applicable from every different angle that's going to be important to that industry.
I guess also kind of touching on what Sonia was just talking about there, with dividing up the work and getting to understand the actual problem itself. So earlier we were just talking about frameworks, and how that framework actually really helped in terms of our research and arriving into our solution was, especially if the framework if a particular framework works well for your problem, those categories within that framework also work well as areas for further research. So for example, if you're thinking about, okay, there's consumers, there's competitors, there's suppliers, etc., then you can assign different people within your team to look up information on that respective topic. And in that way, then you can get that first baseline of research before you kind of delve into, okay, what makes the most sense? Where can we make the greatest impact? And then when you're starting to ask that question, that's when you're starting to do that rating. Okay, is this problem or is this solution a 3 or 2 or 1 in terms of feasibility, or a 3, 2 or 1 in terms of ability, like resources available to be able to actually do that solution. So I think combining what you already know and working with what you've done already and then continuing to develop that further is something that's essential. I would also recommend a couple of resources specifically. Depending on your area, it'll depend, in your case, it'll depend. But I find what was useful was Statista for general statistics information, whether it's demographic or industry stuff. We're just looking for economic data. Or IBIS World if you're looking for particular industry reports. And market research as well is another database that, and all these are generally things that you'll have access to in your typically through a university.
Yeah, and just to dig deeper in the resources, like specifically, and then we don't know what the case is, but it's something about healthcare, it's something about governmental. So with my PhD, it's in the healthcare industry, right? So you'll probably need to know regulatory procedures within Canada concerning the case. You need to know probably patents concerning the case. So you can access resources such as CADTH for regulatory, and then the patents will depend on each country. The US has its own, Canada has its own, and there's like a World Wide Web. But all of them will be in your library page, probably through like entrepreneurship section of library if you have that. UFT has that, which is why I'm saying you may have it too. So I would just search and ask, maybe even preemptively ask your librarian for these resources before the case competition starts.
That's great advice. I think that for our kickoff event, for our own presentation to each of the attendees, having examples of frameworks to those who haven't ever worked with a framework, especially some of the ones you mentioned, like SWOT analysis, Quarters 5 courses, for example, and then also all of the resources that UBC has for specifically, like you said, I think someone said IBIS and like some of the other stats related ones. Those types of resources are going to be essential, especially for having those kind of data driven and data fortified solutions. Great. Let's move on to the next question here. Thank you very much.
I actually just wanted to say one more thing really quickly. It is a little bit corny, but the greatest resource in approaching a case competition is your team. And even if they're strangers, which honestly, some of us were strangers to each other. Our first case competition that me and Abhishek did, we had never spoken before. Your team is there because they're interested in this topic, and you really have to be able to delegate and trust that your team is going to be there, that they're going to do the work that they were assigned, because that's like the only way you're going to get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping that with some of these team members, with the large focus being around BC Cancer Research Center, there is that kind of direct research involvement, like you mentioned, Simon, like the healthcare PhD connection, but also like that's a good point. Just that team element of having someone you can trust to do their specific research and come together and make a cohesive finished product that's coherent. So that's a great point. Not that Courtney. All right, so we're at the stage where, given the case, created frameworks, we've went through our resources, and we've kind of come together as a team, and we're thinking about recommendations. We've ranked our different ideas, feasibility. We maybe have the easier and like the more far-fetched ideas. We've ranked them, and we've maybe found a specific solution we really like, or maybe we found a variety of solutions. How did you go about presenting your solution or solutions to the judges? Is there a specific amount of information you included in your presentations that you really focused on? Was there specific aspects about your findings that you really focused on? Were there certain elements you left for questions and purposely left out? let us know.
Have a Nathan on your team. So that inside joke, Nathan is a wizard at making something look beautiful on a slide. And that really helps send the, yeah, exactly. Just that literally helps drive the message home. And speaking about messaging, your messaging has to be clear. It has to be delivered clearly, specifically, and with passion. And it has to be backed by quantitative analysis, by information. You don't want to have the audience try to guess what you're saying, or they have to connect the dots themselves. You want to make it very clear to them that you understand the problem, that you have done the work, and that this is the solution that will get the problem solved. But having really nice pictures helps a lot.
And I guess kind of building on that too is being organized about the way that you're telling a story. So at the end of the day, if you're thinking about when you're presenting your case, it's ultimately your recommendation to this client about what you think they should be doing in terms of tackling whatever problem that they have in front of them. And to be able to do that, there's a couple of key aspects that you probably want to include. An executive summary at the get-go so that you kind of know where that plan is from start to finish, what you understand as the actual problem itself, what your strategy is and your recommendations, and finally, were there any risks and costs associated with your strategy, and having all of that data and information within your slides. And I know that as a grad student, we tend to not necessarily use all the white space in a slide. What I will say is that don't be afraid to pack your slides in a case competition, because you'll have like 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes to present your entire deck. And within that time, if you're flipping through slides very quickly too, your judges won't have the opportunity to absorb that information. So if you have keep things in bold, make the message very clear, have a summary sentence at the top of your slide, all these little things are essential and will help drive that message home to your judges and ensure that they understand it.
The one thing I'll add to what Nathan said was that the best piece of advice I've gotten through working in pro bono consulting and even through some of the case competitions is that you really want to focus on telling a really good story. And one of the ways we did that was actually storyboarding, the way our presentation is going to flow. So we had all this information, and one of the main things we wanted to do was not present things that are not useful. So we focused on telling a story that made sense from start to finish. And the two terms you could say that you could use to judge whether or not you're doing that well is vertical logic and horizontal logic. So vertical logic is this content of your slides matching what the headline of the slide is. So are you actually presenting what the slide wants you to present? And horizontal logic is there a natural progression going from one slide to the next? And it's almost like any other, even reading a research peer-reviewed publication. You sort of want to outline the context, you want to talk about the problem a little bit, then you want to present your solution, and then you want to justify why your solution makes sense. And if you keep in mind your audience and the flow or the story that you want to tell based on that, that'll really help you communicate your message in a much better way. And even as Nathan was saying, packing your slides is fine, because at the end of the day in consulting, your final deliverable to the client is a slide deck. And it hurts you more to not have information on the slide than it hurts you more to not have that information on the slide than it is to have a packed slide. So ensuring the judges have something to look back on and show that you've actually done the work, even if it's in a big supplemental section at the end of the slide deck that's not even part of your main presentation, it's fine as long as it's somewhere there.
Yeah, definitely. You want to make sure that you're telling a story. And I will say that, at least for me, one of the big differences in making presentations for competitions, for case competitions versus for science, is that for science, you kind of do all the work and then it's time to present and you put a presentation together. But in a case competition, especially in the kind of competition that you guys are doing, which is a very short timeline, you're putting things together as you go. And so this, number one, helps you feel less anxious and more ready. And number two, it helps you make this story because you're kind of putting things together as you're talking about what is the problem? What is the context of this problem? How are we going to solve it? And what's the data that backs up the solution? So kind of as you're going through and doing those things, you're making those slides. So it really feels like a natural progression because your slide deck is telling the story of you actually doing the work behind your case competition. The one other thing that I want to talk about is the actual presentation. So this is something that I thought was very cool and I guess inspiring about how we did our presentations. So having a good solution is important, but communicating that solution effectively and saying what you mean is also really important. And so the way that we did that is we had our slides and we drafted kind of what we were going to say. And then we allowed our teammates to read those drafts and be like, I don't think you need to say this sentence. I think it's important that we draw in this idea and really constantly thinking about what's the main problem that we're solving, what are our goals that we're trying to achieve, and are we communicating that in what we're actually saying? Because right now we're talking off the cuff, we're kind of rambling, and there may be key ideas that we're missing out on. But when you only have 10 minutes to talk about something, it's really important that you draft out exactly what you want to say, and that you make sure that every point, every goal, every action is concise and is in that slide so that the person who's listening to you talk is both hearing exactly what you mean and seeing it on your slide.
That makes me think of like a peer-reviewed publication. Every sentence
It
has
is,
to have
yes.
purpose and has to be concise enough that you're not wasting space and you're making your point come across.
Yeah, and it is peer-reviewed, and your peers are your teammates.
Right.
I would also add to this that if there's ever the unfortunate event that one of your teammates in those pandemic times, loses internet connection and is no longer there for your presentation, having something there that you where someone else can step in and be able to actually say what was going to be said is very helpful, and it prevents you from losing that flow and losing the attention of your client and the audience at large. So I think that's definitely it was very key for us in terms of being able to ensure that all the information we wanted to communicate was actually being communicated. I think one last thing that I want to touch on that we didn't have a chance to speak about yet is, or actually I think Abhishek mentioned it a little bit, with supplemental slides or an appendix. So part of this is basically anticipating what you think the judges will ask you. Again, you have 10 minutes for your presentation. And they always say it's like the Pareto principle, 80% of what you actually do is not going to be in your presentation. It's only going to be 20%, but that rest of that 80% is not wasted. It's stuff that you can put into your appendix, and especially if you know that your judges are going to be I don't know if that financing actually makes sense. That doesn't look like, or that looks like it's far less expensive than I would have anticipated. Being able to pull up that appendix slide and be hold on, let me show you right here. This is where we costed out the strategy. Here's what we had considered. Here are the assumptions that we made. And being able to show your work essentially was, I think, essential to our success, and something that I think the judges themselves really appreciated, because it meant that, okay, you know what, if I can see that on this slide here, there's this much effort behind this idea, and they can show their homework for it, I have more trust in the rest of the slides as well, and I can be assured that this is a strategy that might actually work.
Right. You're getting your supporting evidence and supporting data, and no matter what when the question period comes around, you have a response built into your slide deck for whatever you may expect. Incredible. All right, so going on now to what is your biggest piece of advice? And I think we have this slide, we have one more slide, and then we can jump into some of the Q&A questions that haven't been answered, and then wrap it up once we're done. So what is each of your biggest piece of advice for, let's say, the individual who's never done a case comp, has never heard of one until now, has really involved themselves in research predominantly, but want to apply kind of some of the skills they've learned throughout their masters, throughout their PhD, towards a bigger problem, because they know that they have the background knowledge and the skills, the ability to look through peer-reviewed literature, the ability to communicate, but they just are a little bit wary of this whole case competition idea. and unsure if they fit within it. So what would your biggest piece of advice be? You've already offered so much advice over the last 4 questions, but if you could sum up to one specific idea that maybe hasn't been mentioned before, then that would be excellent.
Yeah, I think one thing you can definitely do, it's not going to be like the most exciting thing, but definitely meeting your team beforehand, breaking the ice, and setting up a Google Drive folder and getting all the stuff up there that you need, so you can get started with it. For our case competitions, we had 7 days. We only have 2 days. So getting organized beforehand will definitely help you quite a lot. And the other piece of advice is, don't feel bad about spending 2 days on this case competition, because participating in case competitions, Sonia and I talk about this all the time, but it goes so much further than you think after the case competition with, and it's like the best experience that you could have, especially if you manage to place. The benefits far exceed the amount of time you don't spend, researching. So have fun with it, and definitely, the effort definitely pays off at the end of it.
Something I wasn't actually initially going to say this, but Abhishek kind of made me think about it. So I saw some of the questions, and some people are saying like, oh, like I'm a newbie, like I don't know how to do this, and like, we were all in, well, maybe not Abhishek. Abhishek sounds like he was born doing case competitions. But when I went into the first case competition, I was really, really nervous, and even like was in this like thought pattern where I was like, oh, but you can just drop out because you have this going on with work, and like kind of trying to like justify that it was okay if I didn't do it. But then kind of, I guess, how I got myself like in a headspace where I was like, this might be terrible, but you're going to do it. And it's important that you do this and you're going to learn something from it, was by meeting my team beforehand, or meeting some people that I thought might be in my team, and kind of just like getting through the initial anxiety of, I have no idea what's going on, by looking at a past case competition winners slide deck. So if you just Google case competition winner slides, like you're going to find them online. And sometimes you also find the case that they won with. So there's this consulting group that we like worship. If you Google Arla, is it Eva Consulting? Arla was the company that they did the competition for. Was it Eva, the group?
I'll drop it in the chat.
Okay. So this was the slide deck that me and my team looked through. And we were just trying to understand, like, what are they doing? What do the slides look like? What's the purpose of putting these things on the slides? And also like getting inspired for putting graphics on the slides, and what are the titles supposed to look like? And it's like, if you don't know what you're doing, just like look at what it's supposed to look like. And that just makes it so much easier, because it's like, it's not all you. You're not making this up from scratch. You have your resources that GrasRoots is giving you, and you have these resources of what perfection is supposed to look like. And that was really helpful for me to kind of like understand what I was supposed to do. I had something else to say, but now I can't remember. Oh, the other thing, the biggest piece of advice, solving a case competition question is really similar to solving a research question. You're just trying to solve a question in a realistic, succinct manner and back it up with data. And I get asked this question by my friends and family all the time. They're like, oh, like you did a case competition about the cruise industry. Like, what do you know about the cruise industry? And it's like, I know nothing about the cruise industry, but 6 years ago, I knew nothing about concussions or MRIs or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, you have the ability to learn things, and you know what you need to find and what you need to present to show that a solution is credible. And at the end of the day, that's all you need.
Yeah, as a master's or PhD student, you have a specific skill at searching, synthesizing, and presenting complex information in a way that you can move it forward. And that's really what a case competition is. It just happens to be in the business world, and us science people are like, oh, no, we don't do business, we do science. But it's really not much different, right? You just put a few dollar signs here and there, and say a few people are impacted in a closer time frame, and that's it. That's what a case competition is. So yeah, my biggest advice, other than you have fun with it, because it really is a fun process, if you start off by saying, I know nothing, I don't know where to start, that's how all of us started. That's a normal place to start. And just start Googling, like Wikipedia, that's your first friend to go to. Then get deeper and deeper from there, just like you would in your master's or PhD.
Yeah, and I guess for myself, my biggest piece of advice for you would be twofold. One, put yourself in the client's shoes. If you're going to be presenting a solution to them, put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself, why did they ask this question to us in the first place? And then from there, also ask, if I was to present the solution that I am making right now to myself, would I take it? I find that kind of framing kind of tells you if you're on the right mark, or if you're on the right track, and you're kind of not aiming there, then it might be time to go back and revise. The other thing I would also mention for your slide deck specifically is pictures are literally worth thousands of words. But if your picture takes more than like 10 seconds to understand, you need to fix it and make it more simple. Because again, you have probably like 10 minutes in your slide deck, or 10 minutes to present your slides. You might have 12 slides, including your title slide and your end slide. So that's like a minute a slide. If you're taking more than like 10 or 15 seconds to understand what is there, it's not going to make it to your judges, and your story is not going to follow through. So you have to make it both succinct enough or comprehensive enough within the slide to be able to convey an impactful idea, but not so complex that it's going to go over people's heads. That complexity, that's not to say that complexity can't be there. You can explain something, but keep that complexity for your appendix, leave it for your judges afterwards. So if they have a question, they'll ask about it. If they don't, then you got away with it.
I really like that. Get in the mindset of the client, get in the mindset of the judges, and try to think and I guess the mindset of yourself, reflect if you would take that solution yourself. I love that. And meet your teammates, have fun with it, and realize that, no one is an expert in everything, and rely on the fact that you can actually, you have this experience of learning complex industries, complex problems, and you know how to address them. Incredible advice, I'd say. Inspiring. All right, so maybe we can cover this really quickly. If everyone has just like a short reason why participate. I know that it's been mentioned a little bit previously, but why participate in a case competition?
I can get started on this one. So I've done 3 case competitions in like less than a year, and I'm hoping to do one more this year. I absolutely love case competitions, and the reason why there are so many case competitions open to graduate students specifically is because if you are interested in breaking out of the academia world and using your skills in a more intense environment, in a higher impact environment, management consulting and consulting is a place where a lot of PhDs, specifically in life sciences and engineering, end up in. And I'm not going to mention what firm it is, but if you go onto the website the hiring side of the firm, it says that more than 50% of our employees have either a master's or a PhD. And the reason being that when you're when you're working for a PhD, one way you can think about your PhD, or the way a lot of people think about their PhD, is you're learning about this really granular topic. But the way consulting firms see it is that you're getting a formal education or formal training in the research methodology. And once you do a case competition, you start soon realizing that you really have the ability to research something you have no idea about. And there's one question in the chat about how do you come up with a solution when you have no experience in finance, econ, government policies. I'll answer that by saying Sonia had no idea about the laws and policies of ports around the world, but overnight she knew which ports are open due to COVID. And the reason is that she knew exactly where to look, and she knew how to find reliable information and synthesize that information. So the reason I like doing case competitions is because it is another way of applying the skill set, and employers do look at your participation in case competitions. It's a great resume item, and it's a great way to network and build your network within this field.
Yeah, thanks Abhishek for that plug. I know all about the ports. Ask me anything, JK. I don't know everything, but yes, it's a great point. I would say that the benefit of doing a case competition is, number one, it is very empowering. It kind of shows you that you can understand and research and come up with a solution and work in basically any industry. And again, if you don't think that applies to you, think about how much you knew about your current research topic 10 years ago, and I think that will answer your question. And the second thing is that it's a very practical way at assessing if this is a career that you're interested in. Kind of to what Abhishek was saying, you know, that you can go the academia route, people have to, it's very commendable, but not everybody will. And there's a lot of careers that you can get into after school, and consulting and management consulting is one of those paths. And this is a very efficient way to find out if you like doing this and if you want to do it for your job.
And if you do want to get into academia, case competitions, they do feed back into your academic work. So my current project, I previously worked on protein toxins. I worked on bacterial toxins. And when I switched to coronavirus in the recent 18 months, I almost strictly use case competition methodology and framework to tackle it. It's a totally different field, totally new field. I had to learn it over a week span. I had to figure out a plausible solution. You do the exact same thing in science. So if you take what you've learned from a case competition, bring it back to your research, you'll be surprised how smoothly you can get it going. And because not many people do that, you do end up standing out as a really good PhD or master's student. So it does feed back into your academic research. And if you end up wanting to maintain or stay within academia, case competition does help you focus and diversify as well.
I guess like I'll say two things. One is that, I mean, it's a bit anodyne, but it's actually legit. I find it legitimately fun to do a case competition. Maybe not everybody will find it fun, but like, sure, you know, I kind of enjoy that, a little bit of a high stress, high strung environment, putting together something that you knew nothing about within a week and then becoming experts on it. Well, not experts, but enough to be able to talk about it in a convincing manner. And I think part of that too is just, you know, if you like to learn new things, that I'm sure a lot of us do in graduate school, case competitions are a great place to kind of apply those skills. And to that end, I find that especially if you're you know, working hard enough and you actually win a case competition, it's a great way to actually show potential employers, whether it's in consulting or otherwise, that you can apply the skills that you got in your graduate school in a concrete manner, in a way that you can actually show, like on a resume here, like I got something out of my graduate school studies and I can actually do this thing where I can tackle a problem and I'm able to solve it. And it's a concrete way of showing that in a way that I don't necessarily think you get a lot of opportunities in academia itself. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those specific advice, and I think we should move on to the Q&A, and within our kind of last 5-10 minutes here, see what questions have been answered, which ones haven't. Let's start off with, and if you want, you can just have a few people kind of take on, one person maybe can take on each question, and we can go from there. So who would like to take on, what strategy do you have while forming your team?
You know what? Sonia can talk about that because she's the one that formed this team.
The leader.
Sorry, my air conditioning kicked on and it sounds like a plane taking off, so I did not hear the question.
Oh, okay, I'll get back to that. So what strategy did you have while forming your team? At least I think that's what the question says.
Yeah, okay, so I guess I'm responsible for forming this team. I formed this team by harassing everyone that I knew or had ever spoken to who I thought would possibly be interested in doing this crazy thing with me, which was ignoring being a science student for a number of days. Again, we did a 10-day long case competition. So I had to tell my boss that I was like not answering her emails for 10 days, but you guys are doing it over a weekend. So you get to like maintain your relationship with your supervisor. So good luck, good on you for doing that. But yeah, just ask people. They're gonna, if they say no, they say no. And then maybe you have a conversation about your career and then maybe they help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we even have an option where you can join on your own, and we've got a Slack channel to find other team members. So,
yeah,
you know, if everyone says no, there's still hope. Mm-hmm. And you can also join, I've seen some case competitions where the first place team was a single person. I
Whoa.
probably wouldn't recommend that.
That's
But yes. All right. Excellent. All right. So how about we do one question per person and then we'll wrap it up. So how about this? I noticed that people in your team are from relatively different fields, imaging, biochemistry, engineering. From your perspective, was it an advantage in solving the case? Were you all on the same page while solving the case?
I'll take this one. Yeah, we have all been from different backgrounds, and it does help to a certain degree because you have the different perspective that they bring. But at the end of the day, none of us were experts in cruises. None of us were experts in fintech. None of us were experts in Zoom. None of us were experts in dog food. But we are all PhD and master students, and we all have that ability to find information and research things. So having a different background just means that they approach it a little differently. But having faith that your teammates are graduate students and have that ability to effectively research a topic and come to a solution is one of the best ways, the best you can hope for. And I guess your case competition is a little bit more focused on a certain topic. So having that expert advice or that expert within your group is always helpful. And one of the things I say is if there's like a natural leader in the group and someone who has that background knowledge, definitely listen to them and definitely take their lead because they have a lot to offer. And if you feel like someone in your group has that advantage, empower them to take the leadership role.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Let's go with, do you have any regrets about the way you approached your case competition? Things you wish you did or things you wish you didn't do?
Yeah, I think I can take this. It's hard to answer that. But I would say, no, it's a learning experience. Either way, like I didn't win the first one and I won the second one. And do I regret what I did in the first one? Absolutely not, because it helped me understand what I do really well and what I need to improve on. But if you win like the first one and every other one going forward, that's awesome. But I don't think you'll learn much from there. So I would say, no, there shouldn't be any regrets. This is all a learning experience and you should take everything as a learning experience, the criticism, the wins, the losses, everything.
Again, another great mindset to go into the case competition with the fact that you're in there to learn, you're going to learn quickly and you're going to apply yourself. That's great. So final question. I guess this isn't really a question, but someone says, I'm a complete newbie to case competitions, but they do have experience with grant writing, so extensive literature research, forming hypotheses, understanding limitations and strengths. I guess, Nathan, I don't know, how similar would you say that case competitions are to grant writing? And if this is some sort of strength this person could leverage?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is that when you're putting together a grant, in some ways it will look a little bit like what you will put together for your slide deck in a case competition. You will have that, your introduction section, your aims and hypotheses, your method, or you won't necessarily have your methods. It's kind of implicit when you're kind of describing about why you chose your strategy, etc. So I think there are aspects that you can apply from what you do in grant writing into your case competition. The key differences, though, that I would probably point out is, one, you need to define your problem a lot more clearly than perhaps you would in a grant. In a grant, sometimes it's a little bit amorphous, like here's kind of a general overview of your introduction. Here's your aim, that's you're trying to tackle one particular thing. In a case competition, you need to make sure that the judges understand that you understand the problem that was presented to you. So you do actually have to dedicate some time to that. The other thing I would also mention too is having that executive summary. And so that's not something that we necessarily do. I mean, you kind of do perhaps in like a little summary or abstract document, but that doesn't necessarily have the level of detail. In a case competition, I think you kind of have a little bit more in that executive summary. You should be able to look at it and say, I understand what this entire project is from start to finish. And you kind of have to reiterate that at the end as well. So, I mean, like, I guess there are some things that are similar. There are some things a little bit different. definitely my best advice here would also be looking up other slide decks too and seeing what they've done. You'll get a good sense of it. It's not like, but you can definitely apply what you've learned before into what you're doing for the case competitions now.
Incredible. Well, thank you everyone so much. Thank you to the Nova team for answering our questions, giving us some inspiration, some hope to apply ourselves, to go into this case competition with a positive mindset, and also to equip us with some tools that, resources, different ways to approach a unique problem and to leverage some of the skill sets we already inherently have through our degrees. So again, thank you so much for this Q&A, and we really appreciate it. And we will we'll let you know how the case competition goes, and see if the winners have used any of these tools, tips, mindset, any of those kind of approaches.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Thanks for having us.
Good luck. Good luck, everyone, for your case competition. I hope it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. We'd love to watch them too. That'd be very cool to see what everybody comes up with. Be on the other side of things for once.
Yeah, absolutely. August 23rd. It's a Monday. It'll be 10 a.m. Eastern time till 1. We'll have the judging and presentations. So maybe we'll send a few links, and maybe we can have kind of an additional judging panel that isn't official, but maybe we can have the Nova team's favorite as a unique prize.
Yeah, dress to impress too.
Coordinate your outfits.
Ooh. Did you guys coordinate?
We
Sure
did.
did.
Of course.
We did.
Yeah, every time.
There's an
Yeah.
underlying theme. You need to figure it out.
That should have been a whole question, is how to best coordinate. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, next time. Awesome. All right. Again, thank you everyone, and best in luck with the case competition, and thanks again to the Nova team. Enjoy your guys' evenings.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.